The bloody siege of Debaltseve, the Ukrainian town that was finally seized by pro-Russian separatists this week in defiance of a ceasefire agreement, claimed the lives of at least 179 Ukrainian soldiers, the senior official said Saturday. Biryukov, the presidential advisor and assistant to Ukraine's defense minister, posted on Facebook that the soldiers had died in the Debaltseve area between January 18 and February 18, when Ukrainian forces withdrew. An additional 110 soldiers were taken hostage and 81 are missing, Biryukov said. Some of the missing are still on their way out of Debaltseve, he said, while others have died. The toll makes the siege of Debaltseve, a strategic railroad hub now shattered by heavy shelling, the Ukrainian military's deadliest single incident over the past 10 turbulent months. A ceasefire to take effect last Sunday, hammered out last week in Minsk, Belarus, among the leaders of Ukraine, Russia, France and Germany, aimed to curb this violence. It is supposed to be followed by the withdrawal of heavy weaponry to create the buffer zone, the release of prisoners by both sides and steps toward new elections. But efforts to stop the fighting have met with limited success so far. Ukraine's National Defense and Security Council said Friday there had been 300 instances in which this latest truce has been violated. Western leaders have steadfastly accused Russia of failing to rein in separatists and of continuing to arm, supply and train them. European nations, the United States and others have imposed sanctions on Russian interests in hopes of pressuring President Vladimir Putin to help end the hostilities. Russia denies any direct involvement and says any Russian soldiers in Ukraine are volunteers fighting during their vacation time. Months of devastating fighting has left nearly 5,700 people dead as of February 18, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights reported Friday. More than 1 million people have been displaced. Some 49 people died on February 28, 2014, and close to 100 more suffered gunshot wounds when, according to protesters, government snipers opened fire on them. 2 days later, President Viktor Yanukovych fled the country, prompting Ukrainian activists to declare victory in the Maidan and promise a new day for a country long torn between its neighbors, Europe to the west and Russia to the east. How things have changed. Today, the country is a powder keg driving spiraling tensions between the West and Moscow. In Moscow, thousands of Kremlin supporters gathered Saturday for a demonstration to counter the Ukrainian commemorations. Many waved flags and banners as they marched near Moscow's Red Square, while others chanted slogans including, "We won't give our country to the enemy" and "No Maidan in Russia." In remarks Friday, President Petro Poroshenko claimed Russia had been working toward the breakup of Ukraine since before Yanukovych was ousted. Moscow was preparing to the liquidation and tearing Ukraine apart long before the victory of Maidan. They were expecting the fall of Yanukovych and accelerated the course of events, Poroshenko said to the families of protesters who died a year ago. According to Ukrainian prosecutors, 77 people died in total during the 2014 protests, which were sparked by Yanukovych's decision to scrap a trade deal with the European Union and instead turn toward Russia. The ensuing ouster of Yanukovych triggered more turbulence and violence. By March, Russia had annexed Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. Weeks later, in April, pro-Russian separatist forces launched their bid to carve off the more Russian-leaning eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions from the rest of Ukraine. In a speech to a London-based defense think tank, the Royal United Services Institute, Britain's senior officer in NATO warned that Russia's ambitions could pose an existential threat to the world. Russia is currently employing a hybrid combination of coercion through rapidly generated conventional forces and subversion, through a number of means, both military and non-military, said General Adrian Bradshaw, NATO's Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe. This hybrid strategy can be used to set the scene for a subversive takeover of territory, as seen in its takeover of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula last year shortly after large-scale military exercises by Russia on its side of the border, he said. we are today seeing conventional forces employed, albeit subject to continued brazen denials by the Kremlin, in eastern Ukraine," he added. "Russia's new strategy holds particular dangers for NATO," he said. "Firstly, the use of subversive tactics initially makes it difficult to identify clearly the hand of a hostile state government in destabilization of a country, making collective decisions harder. Secondly, its ability rapidly to generate large-scale forces could in future be used not only for intimidation and coercion but potentially to seize NATO territory, after which the threat of escalation might be used to prevent re-establishment of territorial integrity," he said. And, Bradshaw pointed out, Russia is not the only threat to NATO states, citing also the danger posed by terror groups such as ISIS, also known as ISIL. Whilst the threat from Russia, together with the risk it brings of a miscalculation resulting in a slide into strategic conflict, however unlikely we see that as being right now, represents an obvious existential threat to our whole being, we of course face threats from ISIL and other instabilities too. Our way of life and the security of our loved ones,